So today we're working on this little puffin. We have done a lot of birds that are more familiar to us, but this is kind of a new challenge, and I thought it's pretty cute. We also have one of our students actually, I think, sees these birds where she lives, so they kind of look like a penguin and a parrot or something combined. So anyhow, I've got out my paints, and because I moved, I didn't have one of my felt markers that I usually label the paint with. So I'm just going to quickly go over it. It's white, black, cad yellow light, yellow ochre, orange, quinacridone red, viridian green, transparent brown oxide, and red oxide, and cobalt blue, and ultramarine blue. So we didn't need a lot of colors for this one because it's got a lot of pretty neutral colors to it. I've got the original painting here, and so I added some colors like purples, but I've got the colors here to mix all that. So just grab my paper towels. Okay, so to make this kind of fun, what I did was I was thinking he's got such an orange beak and these real orangey feet. I wanted to, you can see there's bits of that color coming through, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to have fun with the background a little and tie in the bird with the background instead of just a flat gray background. I thought that would be fun. So I do a wash first, and usually my wash is a little bit of a, more of a gray tone, but because I want that kind of orangey color to come through, I am going to start off. Let me just grab a little bigger brush. Okay, so I'm going to use this 8 flat, and I'm going to use just some of this transparent red oxide, because that kind of gives a bit of an orangey color when you see it later. If you are painting in acrylic, you could just use a little bit of orange paint with some white and just paint your canvas beforehand and let it dry using a little bit of orange, or if you have transparent red oxide, use a little bit of that. I know sometimes it's hard for people to find those colors in acrylic. Okay, so now that I've got a little coating down, you don't want to go too much because you're going to be painting that blue later. Ideally, you could do this the day before and let it dry, but it works as long as you get enough paint on there. And I'm absorbing a lot of that terp that I put on there to spread it, so just kind of wipe that off, and now you see you get that kind of light orangey color. Okay, and now I'm going to move down to a 4 flat, and this is that silver Bristol-on brand. Another good brand I like are these Princeton Aspen from Michaels. They work really well. Surprisingly, it's a really good quality brush. And okay, now to sketch our little bird out, I usually use something kind of neutral. So I'll just use a little bit of this brown oxide here. And I had to paint on this. This is a 10 by 10 canvas because it's a larger bird, so it's not going to do it justice, I think, to paint it on something small. I really needed to fit that scale to kind of show it, I felt. So I'm just gonna kind of mark off. I always like to mark off kind of where I want the top of the bird's head. It could be up a little higher, just because I've made the mistake so many times of starting down here, and then by the time I get up here, I don't have any room anymore. So, and then I like to, if it's a branch, I'll paint a branch, but at this time it's a rock. And these birds, if you look them up online, they're always on the edge of cliffs, you know. Just gonna add a little ultramarine blue. And so they're very rugged birds. They're used to really, you know, cold Atlantic kind of temperatures. So yeah, okay, so now I've kind of marked off where the head's gonna go. It's little, actually they're not little, they're pretty big feet, obviously, for swimming and everything. So I'm gonna just get that foot in there so I kind of know where to gauge my bottom of the bird. So just kind of giving myself some little markers. And okay, so you see these angles on the bird. There's some really, his chest comes way out. So that's something when you're drawing this to really pay attention to, as it comes way out, this bird. You got kind of an oval shape here, and you've got a very squared, angular kind of head. You could consider that a circle, and then a triangle here. You can look at it in shapes to help you get the right drawing. And even you can see in my painting, when I looked back at it, his head is still a little too small. It looks fine, but if I was going to get technical, the head is quite large, a little bit larger. So I just, it looked cute enough, so I thought I'll just leave it. But if it does the bird justice, then I just leave it. If it doesn't, then I'll fix it. But I felt he looked very puffiny, so I left it. So what I'm looking at when I'm painting, this is his first leg. I'm looking at kind of the angle of his leg, his next leg's there. And I'm also looking at the negative spaces between the two legs. So I want to make sure that little bit's there. And now I'm going to look at this, just roughing this in. It doesn't need to be exact, because I find it's like a puzzle. When I get something going, then I can go back and adjust it if it's you just got to kind of start somewhere. So his chest comes way out. And I think I had the angle a little off there. And then we got his beak. And it really helps to look at that angle, otherwise you'll get the beak going the wrong way. So, you know, there's this little angle and that, and you can see that kind of forms a triangle, that negative space. So I'm just going to try to look for that when I'm drawing it. And I haven't painted many puffins before, so it's also good to try things that you don't paint very often. It kind of stretches your ability in the drawing area. Okay, so we've got this kind of angle, and I'm just really trying to simplify those shapes for now. And then I can always adjust the sizing later. But I like painting with this transparent paint because you can just kind of erase it pretty easy if you. So I think the beak's a little big. We'll see. There's a lot going on. The beak is like a artwork in itself on this bird. So we got, it comes down. And okay. Okay, so that's getting closer to it. Now what I want to do is I want to erase those marks a little because I don't want to get tied into that sketch too much. Okay. So we know the background is going to be pretty simple, and we've got our rock here. I think the main thing I want to do is make sure I get that little face in there correct. So I'm going to switch to a smaller brush, and I've got this little brush from Michael's that I can maybe get a little more detail in. Try it out. So it's really like the beak is almost like a whole network of shapes, and there's this little thing and all this. So the main thing I want to do is get that. The rest of him or her is pretty simple. So I want to maybe just work on getting this head in there first. First of all, I want to maybe adjust the size a little, and comes up, and then we got this little angle. And his head, of course, is just to make it more tricky for us, is kind of looking towards us. So there's a little bit of that white piece there that's showing he's kind of looking over. Sometimes if it's a little too tricky, I'll just, eliminate that white part that shows he's kind of looking. So this is the little bit of white. If it's too tricky, you could just make it like you can paint him fully from the side by eliminating that. Birds got to make it complicated for us. Okay. Got that little mask. And this little kind of round thing. And there. So I feel like that that sizing is pretty good, because I can go back to my photo and I can line up your paintbrush with the beak and the chest and kind of see how close you are. And his little beak kind of lines up right about there with the chest. So those are just little things I use to go through the painting with. And I'm going to switch brushes just because I don't really like how stiff that one is. I'm going to switch to this little flat, and it's number 1 silver Bristol on, and it gives me a little more flexibility. And the next thing we have is this the black sections are going to stand out the most because they're the darkest part of the beak. So I'm going to draw that shape in first. So we have that little area, and then kind of swoops up here. And then we have this cream colored area. And then we have this sort of pretty, all these this orange area here. So the main thing I want to do is I wanted to get the shape of that black part of his beak in. And then I want to do the same here, just kind of really get that drawing and the angle right of that little mask that comes on here. Okay, it kind of wraps around down here, and then he's got okay. Okay, so I feel like that's okay. We just got to make sure we don't forget his eye. So it's up high. The eye is amazing. It looks almost like where they might have got the idea of how to paint clowns' eyes with the red underneath and around against the white. It's like the early inspiration for the sad clown. So we got this black center part, and then we've got these black marks. There's red, a reddy color, and then like a perfect, like the football players or something with that black patch here, which is probably helps them the way football players to not reflect as much sunlight into their eyes. That would make sense. And then there's a little bit of decoration coming from the eye. So and then we've got this little thing that comes right here. And I'm always looking at the kind of angles of these shapes, how they connect. And sort of just the main, the main shapes, making sure I got those right. Or as close as I can to right. Okay, so I think that looks pretty okay for the drawing. So the drawing will be a little more challenging just because it's not even something you can recall from memory like a cardinal. It's something so new that you just got to really pay attention to those lines. So the main thing I think is you got to get this black shape, get that mask in there, so that you can start to build your painting with that. This kind of comes down a little more here. There. Okay, so I think the next thing we can do is start blocking in. So I feel like I will block in the white areas first, because I can get that in there, and also I can use the white that I mix here to start shaping the inside there. So I'm going to use one of my white mixes that I like is the Viridian and transparent brown oxide to get this sort of warm white. And the main thing is to show off this nice white chest. If you squint when you look at your reference photo, then you can kind of really see how dark that area is, and that'll give you the dimension that you want when you start painting that white there. So I really want to mix up some, maybe if it's a little too brown, just add a little more of the Viridian, and then you get a nice grayish color. And I'm going to make a little more just with less white. So I'm moving off to the edge of my paint puddle here, so that I'm not, you don't want to keep mixing. You want to have a little variety. So I'm going to add a little bit of that Viridian. You can even add a little blue to the darkest mix. I'm going to add a little cobalt. Maybe a little orange in there just to warm it up again. You want warm in your shadows. You don't want your shadows to all be real dark, blue or real icy cold. You want them to be dark and warm. It just looks nicer. So I'm going to start by getting some of that real dark color down in here first. And especially when you're working with white, you can always lighten it up pretty easy, but it's sometimes hard to darken it. You have to add a lot more paint. There's little feathers on these legs. I'm just putting a little note of that dark white there. And I'm going to put a little where I see some dark here. And I'll move to my lighter mix. Just add a little more white in there. And just kind of get some of that in there. Depending on what you like, you can leave some of the background shining through on the bird if you're going to leave it through the background. It's really up to you how you want to experiment with certain things. I've seen a lot of paintings that I love that, they paint the background red and then you see bits of red throughout the whole painting. So you can experiment with that. And I'm going to add a little more white, but you notice I'm not putting the white right back into that puddle. I want to have a variety of these grayish whites. So it's so tempting just to go, and I do it myself, just to go right back and put that white right in there. You want to create for yourself a little mix of these things. So this is a number 4 silver, and this is a brand of silver Bristol-on. This is silver black pearl flat, and I don't really know what the difference is. It's maybe a little softer. I don't even know. Maybe I just ordered it to try it out. I think it's maybe a little bit smoother than the synthetic bristles. But anything on a canvas, it doesn't really matter. It's going to look a little rougher because the canvas is rough. If you use a smooth surface, then you may want to use smoother brushes. So I'm kind of building that, but I'm not, this would be white. So you can see we got a lot of room there with the values. And you can take some of that dark and use it where you got two areas of the same thing going on. So you have this dark going to white, and then here you have the dark going to the white cheek. So you're kind of imitating the same thing here. And then there's a little bit of shadow here and a brighter white there. That's going to give that shape that you want on the bird. So it's really a nice way to learn how to use whites again, doing this class, because whether it's a bird or you're painting a white teacup or a flower, you really need to know how to mix your grays and whites. And this is just a fun way to, I'm gonna add a little yellow ochre to that mix. So I've mixed viridian, brown oxide, and white, but I wanna really warm up this area because it's kind of more of a focal point. So I'm gonna add that yellow ochre. And when you add the yellow ochre, it just really warms that color up nicely. It's less blue and more, it's just a really nice warm color. And I feel like that's what you want with the birds details here. So I'm putting a little bit of that shadow in here just to give that, it's gonna really show that roundness there. And kind of saving this little edge here, you'll notice so there's a little edge, just so I can, I can see my kind of guidelines, and B, I'm gonna also be popping a really nice little white highlight where his face goes from dark to, there's a little trim around his face of white, real light feathers. So kind of gives me a little placeholder. Okay, so we've kind of got our white blocked in. I haven't put any details yet. And I think, oh, there's also this little, you can give yourself a reminder. If you're gonna put that little bit of his face, you can give yourself a little, what I call a reminder paint here of that, where his head's turning, that little bit of white. I do that because I would sometimes forget that I'm gonna do that. When I paint, I don't usually, well, I don't talk to myself the whole time. I just paint. And so I'll sometimes just get distracted or something and forget. So I'm just using straight black. And when it comes to buying your paint, sometimes it matters, but I just buy this Utrecht Artist Oil for the black. It's a little bit, they're just kind of a cheaper brand, but they work really well. Same with this brand, the Blick Studio Oil color for yellow ochre. It seems to work just as good as any. So you can chintz out on some of your colors, but white, I go with Winsor Newton, because I feel like white, you kind of have to buy something a little better because you're using it to mix, and sometimes if you don't have that white, you just, I don't know, it just doesn't give you the same pizzazz in your flower paintings, or so I usually go with something like that. Winsor Newton is pretty good. Some people have their favorite white paints, but I just stick to that one. Some people like a stiffer white. I like the kind of, it's in between. It's really not as fluffy as the French brand that some people really like. It's just a really good middle of the road white. So now I'm really just blocking in with some of this black. You know, if you get nervous because people have told you not to use black, straight black, or anything black in your paintings, just add a little cobalt, or you can use ultramarine blue. Now you're not using just black, you're using a blue black. So you can use that. They sell blue black right out of the tube in, I think Winsor Newton sells it. But you can always just mix your own. So I'm just blending this in. I haven't really gotten too picky about how this edge is going to be, you know, worked out yet, but I just kind of vaguely drew in the basic shape. Kind of also you see a bit of that side angle there, just so you got the white, you see the side, you also see a bit of the, where his chest is gonna show a bit of the side there. So for this, I really shouldn't be blocking with such a tiny brush. I'm gonna switch to what's this? This is like a number 4. I feel like a 4 is a good size. It's a really good in-between. So you can mix a little ultramarine blue in there if you want and get that going. And there's sort of a ring, there's a little ridge of feathers here that come in, and then there's the tail feathers that kind of come out. So you can, you know, make sure you know where that ends and where it starts for later. Just blocking that in. And what I'm going to do now is, I wasn't really too picky about where the feathers were, but if you look at the reference photo, you can kind of gauge how far this wing comes down by, you know, looking at this area here. You know, how far is that wing from this leg, for example? And then you can kind of see that my drawing's a little off, and I can make some adjustments there. Especially while this is just sort of, you know, the block-in paint. We didn't add much paint there. So I think it's gonna come down like this more. And that's pretty good. Okay, so I feel like that's pretty good, that angle there. Okay. Now I'm gonna block in a little more. I can block in, I'll finish blocking in the white. I think I got sidetracked here, but I'm gonna block in some of the lighter. So I'm using some white back into that mix of, you know, grayish whites, and I'm just gonna finish blocking in. I tend to jump around a little when I paint. Sometimes it's good, sometimes, you know. So I'm just paying attention to the photo a little here. Getting in where the lighter white is. Go back if you need to, get some more of the darker white. And I save the real white to the end. I don't want to get, you know, I want to add all these other colors and then adjust the final highlights in there later. Save the fun for last. And go back to this black, and I'm looking at how this forehead goes. This kind of comes like a little bit more of a triangle there. There. And we can now block in some of these oranges. And for the painting, I kind of exaggerate a little bit. I use a little more red in mine, but we can block in using a little orange and some transparent red oxide. And I think I added a little bit of this quinacridone red. So you're mixing up this kind of deep, reddy orange color. And we'll just block in a little of that. So you can, as you block in, you can kind of pay attention to, he's got like kind of these almost like kneecaps or something, and then it goes down. And these birds have to probably be in some pretty freezing cold waters, so these are probably tough little cookies, these birds. Get a little more orange in there. Adding a little more orange, you get it a little lighter. And while you got that color going, you might as well go up and start blocking in this very amazing beak. So I'm using a number 1 flat. You can use whatever brush you want that you feel you'll get, the angles or these little tiny details in with. You could use like something like this, one of those little round brushes, whatever you feel more comfortable using. And so that's good enough. And this comes up a little higher. Oh yes, and we've got this little bit here underneath the eye. There's the eye has a little ring of that beautiful color just near the bottom. So I put that in now because later, when I add the black and everything, I can, I can carve into that. It's looking like a lot of fun now with all this color. I really love this when you get to this stage and you can start to see what's happening. So now I've just added a little white into that mix, and you can add a little white into that orange mix just to kind of sketch in some of those edges that you see on his little feet. Just give yourself, I'm just blocking in, so it doesn't have to be perfect. You can just get a little bit of that here. And then once you get in those lines the way you like them, you can, oh, I missed one here. You can just kind of soften using the edge of your brush. I just don't like spending a lot of time on the feet of birds because they're so, I think it would be just really too challenging to get them exact. So I try to simplify them a little bit. So I won't put the little nails there. There's some really sharp little black nails. We're going to save those to later because you want to get the color of the rock and everything in first. So now I want to go back and I want to work a little more on his face. So I'm going to get some of that black and get a little bit of that in there. And make sure you get the angle. It kind of goes, the beak, that black kind of takes the angle like that because it's going up and over. His beak has that shape. And then you got this side of the beak here. This is the fun stage. And then I'm going to get his eye. And the little round part of his eye is the darkest. And so now I'm going to move back to a little bit bigger brush, and I'll use the same brush I was using for the black before, except I'm going to add more cobalt to that black mix and white, so I get that sort of bluey highlight, bluey grayish black highlight for things like the beak. Put a little bit of that in there, and above the eye, the black is lighter than the black in the eye, so I use a bit of that. If you want it more black, just get a little more black in there, and then maybe you want that a little more black. And he's got this real defined little line here. And we're going to get some more of that blue and black mix and white, cobalt blue, black and white, and add a little bit of that highlight there that you see on his back. He's getting some reflection from the sky. And then down here, the feathers have a little bit, I think a little bit of brown in them. So I mixed a little transparent brown oxide into that mix. And then you're going to see a little bit of a lighter mix for these feathers here, where this little ridge of feathers kind of sticks out. And then it gets darker here. And same with the tail feathers of the birds. I usually try to just keep them pretty, not as defined, you know. I'll soften that edge later. And then there's a little bit of this dark here. So you can kind of see the ridge there. And okay, now I'm going to go back to working with getting some of these. So I'm going to get some cad yellow light to mix for this little orange thing and some quinacridone red. and some yellow ochre. And you kind of get this little doodad on his face in there. And then you want to get, it has a little bit of a lighter trim to it, so I'm going to add some little bit of yellow to it and a little bit of white to that mix, little cad yellow light and white, and just kind of add that little bit of detail there. And for the, we want to get these creamy colored lines, I'm just going to use some yellow ochre and some white. And I'm going to kind of start by blocking those in. I'll add a little brown oxide to the mix, just to darken it a little. It's like putting face paint on. And then I'm going to use a little bit of that, and right down here there's some little lines and here. Kind of just have to if you get some of that black on there, like I did, just kind of make sure to stop painting and get some, wipe your brush off so it's clean again. Now I'm added white to that grayish black mix to get that highlight on his forehead there. You want to get show that the light hits there too. So that's just some white mixed into that bluey black mix. And now you can see it's starting to get some shape. Now you still got to lighten this top part of the beak, so get a little bit of that white mixed in with that black mix, blacky blue mix, and just sort of lighten the top of that. And I'm just looking at the reference photo, and there's quite a lot of light hitting right here. And same with the top of the beak, you can get a little bit of this lighter mix that we used for the feet and just get a little bit of a highlight there. So now you can see it's kind of dulled all that to more of a, it's all getting a lot of light reflection there. And then under this little thing, there's a little bit of black paint. So I'm going to take a little bit of that bluey gray mix and put my brush down and just whip up a little bit of that. And I think maybe just has a little bit more black in it. And that's how I'm going to make that little mark there. And just zoom in. So I just put my brush in that blacky blue mix, and I just put my brush right on the edge of that line and just lift it up, and that gives you that little, he's got a little mark there, and then he's got a little bit of a shadow kind of, well, it's his feathers, but it looks more like a shadow. But that little bit of feather comes in there. And then I can just lighten this a little more. And I want to, while I'm up here, get a little bit of that white. And he's got a real trim of white that just kind of goes around. And as it goes around, it kind of gets a little bit in the shadow. So you can mix a little cobalt in there just to set it back a little. I'm going to wipe my brush and get some more of that white. And just kind of make sure I get that little, I'm going to dull it with some of that gray mix there and just kind of finish his little face. And I'm wiping my brush in between because it's kind of, you know, you're at the border there with the black paint and you get a little bit of the crossover here. And that kind of goes up here. And up here. And while we're doing this now, I'm gonna get my white and add a tiny touch of orange. That really makes the white stand out even more. And I'm gonna work on the highlight of the white now. So I'm gonna go and really show off that. So you'll get a little bit of black, just make sure you wipe your brush. And wherever I see that it's mostly really light, catching a lot of the light, I'm gonna put in some of this white with a tiny bit of orange. And I'll blend it a little here, but don't blend too much because then you'll lose that. You're better off leaving it looser and having that dark going to light. If you want to blend, just make sure you dry your, clean your brush off till it's like kind of dry, and then you can go back at it like this. And I'm going to get some of that white and a little bit of that orange. And I'm going to go and add the real white to here because that'll really show off that shape, that roundness going down. Now this brush is a little too small for that. I'm going to switch back to this number 4. Don't like using too small a brush because it gets too, for me, a little too choppy there. So I'm just gonna, again, what you don't want to do is you don't want to cover up all this shadow. So as you get to the area where it, like around here is where it starts to go under, you just kind of blend it a little on that edge so that you've got all this still here. Then he's got light down here. So I'm just going to use my brush and show that little bit of light there. And just always remember to wipe your brush if you get any of that black in there. And I'll take my brush and draw in some of that white. I'll just pull it into the black there just to show off some of those feathers. And then you can do the same here. You can get the black and just kind of pull some of that down into your white, and then go back and you can reshape it a little, but it creates some nice real painterly strokes. And while I'm here, I want to get I always put a little highlight on the bird's eye because I just feel they just, they come to life a little. So I'm going to just take a little bit of this blacky gray mix so that it's not a over the top highlight, but just put a little bit of that on there. I don't know if you can. So it gives it some roundness to, you know, to the thing. Okay, so I'm gonna skip ahead to, now this line here has to come a little bit rounder. And you can soften this edge a little. I'm just using the very tip of my brush to kind of draw some of that black paint in. Okay, so now we can work on, I want to work on the rock that he's on. So we just want to mix up some kind of grayish brown kind of color, it looks like. So I can get my brown oxide and just mix it right into this puddle that we've been using for the bird. And I need a little more paint. It's a little too, get some cobalt, brown oxide, and you get sort of a nice gray color. If you want it to be a little more on the brown side, just add a little more. I add a little bit of red oxide and you'll get somewhat of a kind of a browny gray. And you can go darker, just add some, just keep fiddling, you know, add browns, add ultramarine blue will set it darker than the cobalt, so you can just play around with those three colors. You'll mix a gray every time. So kind of where I see some real darker spots, I'm just adding this in. And you can get some of this blacky blue color, add some of that transparent red oxide to it. Get some real dark shadowy color in here. In between. Okay, and then now I'm going to add some more white into that mix, and that'll give you the maybe a little brown red oxide, because the rock is a kind of looks like a, you know, more of a rusty color. So you got, now you have some variety in the rock. And we're going to put his little claws on there after I get this rock in. Blocking in the rock. I remember the Puffin book, you know, Puffin books, they always had this Puffin on the side, so it's kind of funny. I never would have thought I'd be painting a Puffin one day, but I always liked that logo. Now we're just going to move up a little, add some more white to the mix, and then we can kind of add our final kind of rock shapes here. You can even add a little yellow ochre so that, and a little more white, so you really get some. This one has a lot of light reflecting on it back here. And I'm just kind of looking at the reference photo to give me some idea of it, but it's not, you know, it's not my main focus is the rock, so I'm just sort of I'm going with it. And then I have fun with the colors that I find kind of complement the bird. So I added a little purple because that's the way I am. So I've got the quinacridone red, and cobalt makes my favorite purple color. It's too red, just add some more cobalt. And I just add a little touch of it here and there. And we'll add some in the background, but that's just to kind of go with the orangey red color. I did that. Now I'm going to use this little tiny brush and I'll just get some of this brown oxide and some cobalt, really just anything to make a dark shadow. I want to really put some of that under his little flipper, because it'll just kind of settle, make him, look like he's actually really standing on the rock here. And then you can soften the edges, but I just want to get that shadow under there. So that gives them a little bit more grounding, and then you can go and add a few more details while you've got this color here into your rock. Okay. And all right, just looking at what I need to get going next. So I think what I'll do next is I'm going to get the background going. So I'll get my palette knife and I've saved some white here that I haven't mixed in with other colors, and I'll get some cobalt from the edge here, and I'm going to mix up kind of a light blue. I like this color and I just stick with it. I use it in landscapes, and you can use it in a bunch of different paintings. Just kind of a nice mellow sky mix. I didn't want to go with the gray because I thought it needed a little bit of cheering up. So I'm just going to dab some of this around and get that first layer down, and then we'll go and see what it needs next. So I'm going to just use this number 8, make sure it's clean. Get more paper towel. And I'm going to just start moving this around, but what you want to do is just make sure you leave some of these little spots if you want to. Of course, you don't need to do it, but you can do it however it feels. Go with your gut. You can, when you're painting, a lot of problems you can solve if you just trust your own eyes and your own gut. When you're looking at it critically, you can usually figure it out and say, okay, that's what I think it needs, and probably that's what it needs. And then sometimes you don't trust your gut, and then you go and overpaint because you think, well, technically I should probably do that, or I should probably, I mean, that teacher told me not to do that, so I better not do that, you know. And then before you know it, you go, oh, I just painted it the way I didn't want to paint it. So sometimes you just have to leave it and take a little risk here and there. And that's how you get your own style too. It's good to look at what other people do that you like, what they do when they paint. So you get ideas and you take little bits and pieces and try them out, you know. So I'm just gonna block in. And you can really, you know, make some of those rocky edges more, you know, angular if you want. And this kind of comes in here. And okay, running really thin now. Got to get some more. So yeah, mix up some more. Just try to get it, the blue from the back here, because I had the black and everything going earlier. And mix until we got it mostly the way we want it. And just kind of blob some more on. When I'm working on a larger canvas like this, and it kind of saves a bit of time so that you're not having to watch this too long. And I'll just dab that around and we'll get this. So when you get close to the bird, you can bring your brush right up and, you know, I always learned from a Canadian painter, Robert Genn. He said, when you're painting mountains, don't paint around them. You know, don't paint like this around them, so that later on when it's hanging on your wall, you've got, you know, a halo around your mountain. So I apply the same thing to when I paint birds. Even if you did go around it like this initially, you want to go back with your brush and just kind of break it up. You don't want to look at it later and see those lines just jigging around, unless that's your style. I mean, I think Van Gogh's Starry Night was a little bit that way with the everything going around and around, but try to, you know, bring in some strokes like this. Don't have them all going around. And I don't even mind leaving some of that orange shining through. Got a little black in there, so I'm going to put some more paint on top. And you will end up with getting a little black. So if you do, just wipe off your brush. If you get too much black in there, like you get a big blob, just use your palette knife or something to really lift it up and lift it off. So now you see this transparent red oxide that we did the wash earlier. It's really blending with this bird in a fun way. Okay. The background block in. Get some between the legs there. And that's good enough. So now we've got enough paint all around the bird that we can adjust some of the, we want to get that background in so that we can kind of bring in some of those feathers and everything and soften some of those edges. I'm also going to just, before I do that, I want to add a little more cobalt blue to that mix, and I'm going to put a little bit of a darker note kind of here and there, just again, because it adds a little more, you know, interesting stuff going on. And I feel like it really will bring out this area here. So that's probably enough. You don't want to go too overboard. Then you can just kind of blend it in. Just adds another layer of something happening in there that kind of adds to your background a bit. Makes it kind of interesting. So I just got a little black there, you'll see, and what I did was, because the paint is so thick, I just used my brush to scoop it up. And that's that looks to me a little more interesting. So now I'm going to go back to my number 4 brush, and I want to do some more work on the edges. So edges can be formed with paint by putting a light next to a dark, and they can also be formed by the actual, texture. So actually, cutting through the paint like this, softening off some of those edges. You can grab some of that, that initial mix we mixed for the shadow colors here, and just go get some paint, and you'll get a little bit of the background, but that's okay. And I just want to just soften that edge a little here, and you can soften some of those edges. You can take off an edge like that if you want to be really, loose, or you can, and we got these edges here, you can kind of loosen up just by using the edge of your brush, but make sure to wipe your brush in between, just so you don't get too many, too much of a black and white mix. And then we've got this edge here that's quite sharp. So again, I take my brush and just kind of using the corner of my brush, just sort of jig it a little so that I'll zoom in a little so you can see. But I'm just using the paint that's on there, and you can just, blend it that way. You can also just take your brush and make sure each time you use I'm just using like the dry brush here. And I kind of just play with that like that. Just softening some of those edges. And You can make it more dramatic, you know, if you want to, you can just really whip some of that paint into the background. And I'm gonna go and add some of these feathers that kind of come around the leg. Make sure you get that darker shadow color there. And oh, I kind of painted my background over this leg, so I gotta fix that a little. I know there's enough orange paint under there that I just had to use a brush and pull off that blue paint that I pulled over there earlier. And then we got some detail work we can do here. So just you can mix up some transparent brown oxide and viridian, some yellow ochre in there, and just get some of that real shadow in between the legs there. And there's a little bit here. And I'm just kind of working that in there. And then on the other side, there's a little bit of a highlight right here. You know, just those are the little details that you kind of look for at the end. And put a few, you know, more light, a few little feathers that are more obvious across the legs there. And I'm gonna switch to this little tiny brush and get some of that white. And I want to put in that little bit of white, you know, to show the right in here, just to show that little that his face is kind of churning. And just kind of softening that edge a little. And where that little white part is, you can go get some of the darker blue and just, ooh, there's something in my brush there that I wasn't ready for. Get that white and cobalt blue mix. And you can put a little bit of more of that darker blue right next to it, so it shows it off a little. And then of course you just kind of soften it away a little. And then I'm gonna some of this lighter white paint again and just kind of build up a little more. And it comes down here a little further. And the cheek has a little bit more of a highlight here. And if you really want to get it super, super white on there, you can always let this kind of dry up a little, and then you can come back to it. It'll be easier to to get it to really stand out. So around the eye here, I got a bit of that white and cobalt blue mix. I'm just putting there's a little bit of light hitting just the edge of the eye there. So I just put that in there. And when you're working with the white, make sure you use a clean paper towel so that when you wipe your brush, you won't get other colors mixing in. I'm looking at the reference photo and I'm just kind of touching up the shape a little. Again, you gotta wipe that brush because it gets some of that black paint. So you can spend time reshaping this once you're done. You can look at your reference photo a little bit when you're done the major parts of your painting. Then you can go back and really tweak some of these little elements. Like he's got that little ridge there. There's just a lot. This little bird's face is like a whole still life setup almost. It's got so much going on that you could spend days on it if you wanted to. So now I also see the background is kind of mucked up his beak a little. You get some of that orange, some of that red oxide, something kind of deep, and maybe a little dab of quinacridone red. And I want to go in and just shape that a little. And his beak kind of comes over the end here, so just want to make sure I get that in there. And I'm just using a bit of that more orangey, pale orangey white mix just to get a little bit more of a highlight there. And if you wanted to, you could go back and work on some of the details, like get a little bit of that quinacridone red and orange, something to darken it a little, some brown oxide or something, just to darken it a little, and go back and you could put a little bit of detail on the little paddles. More shadow in there. And oh yes, my favorite part, I almost forgot, we want to get those little nails in there. So I'm using this little round brush. It's like a 0 round, but we can do it with the round like this. Or if you don't have a round, go to your flat brush, the number 1, and just do the same thing using the edge of your brush. So he's got a little claw showing here. And I'm sure he does a lot of fishing with these claws. And we got that one there. And there's a bit of one here. So then you can always get some of that cobalt blue and white and add a little black, so you get kind of that bluey black, and you can go back and add a little bit of the touch of that bluey black just to the top of them where it kind of hits the foot, and just kind of, so it adds a little bit of light to them. And you can take that same color and just, you can put a few of those details on that little ridge of feathers there. And same with here, grab a bit of that grayish mix and you can put the odd bit of light on there. And I might, you can, if you want, you can take some of that purple that, you know, we put on the rock, and sometimes I'll take a little bit of that purple, mix it into my background mix, and you can put like a little dab here or there, just again, just for fun, if you want to go with the oranges, complements the oranges. You can also take some of the orange and put it on top of the paint. So you get the underpaint and then you get some little flicks of orange on top of the paint. It just adds some more some more layers of fun. So I think that's pretty much it. You can always, of course, do more, but I always like to see how all of you add so much time and effort to your paintings and details. When you post it on the Bold Strokes, it really shows how hard you work on your paintings. And for those of you who are afraid to use the Bold Strokes to post, I totally understand. If you don't use Facebook, you can always email me at kristaeatonart@gmail.com, and you can send me your picture to have, you know, get some help there. So I'm going to switch cameras now and say hi again.